For 46 years, the name of Carla Walker's killer was already inside the original police file. Investigators had questioned him in 1974. They knew he owned the same type of gun connected to evidence left at the scene. But he said the weapon had been stolen. He passed a polygraph examination. And he walked away. The case grew cold. Carla's family waited through the years, while evidence collected from one terrible night remained sealed in storage. Then, in 2020, scientists recovered a male DNA profile from a piece of Carla's clothing. There was no match in the national database. So investigators tried something that had not existed in 1974. Forensic genetic genealogy. The search produced a surname. McCurley. It was the same surname investigators had written into the case file nearly half a century earlier. And soon, a drinking straw pulled from 5 bags of garbage would connect that old name to the evidence Carla had left behind. Carla Walker was 17 years old. She was a junior at Western Hills High School in Fort Worth, Texas, and a cheerleader with a life that still seemed wide open. On the night of February 17th, 1974, Carla attended a Valentine's dance with her boyfriend, Rodney McCoy. After the dance, the couple stopped at a nearby bowling alley. It was the kind of ordinary decision that should have meant nothing. A familiar place, a parking lot, a few quiet minutes inside a car before going home. Carla lived in a world of school hallways, football games, friends, and family. Nothing about that night suggested it would become part of a murder investigation lasting nearly half a century. But before the night was over, a school dance would become the opening scene of one of Fort Worth's longest-running cold cases. And Rodney McCoy would become the only known witness to the moment Carla was taken. Carla and Rodney were sitting inside his car in the bowling alley parking lot. Then the passenger side door was suddenly pulled open. A man reached inside. He dragged Carla from the vehicle and struck Rodney with a handgun. The attack happened quickly. Rodney was injured and left behind. Carla was forced away from the car and disappeared into the night. When police arrived, the parking lot offered little explanation for what had happened, but it did contain one important object: a magazine from a Ruger pistol. Investigators began tracing people in the Fort Worth area who owned a weapon that could use that magazine. One of those names was Glen Samuel McCurley. Police interviewed him during the original investigation. McCurley said his Ruger had been stolen before Carla's murder. Investigators also learned that he had purchased another magazine for that type of pistol after the crime. Still, the connection was not enough. McCurley was given a polygraph test. He was released, and the investigation moved on to other leads. For the next 3 days, Carla's family waited for news. Searchers looked across the area surrounding Fort Worth. Then, on February 20th, the search ended near Benbrook Lake. Carla's body was found inside a culvert. An autopsy determined that she had been strangled and had likely been sexually assaulted. She was 17 years old. The discovery changed the case from an abduction into a murder investigation. Detectives followed hundreds of leads. They interviewed possible witnesses. They examined the gun magazine. They searched for the person who had attacked Carla and Rodney in that parking lot. But no arrest came. The evidence could tell investigators that a violent crime had happened. It could not yet tell them who had committed it. Over time, the case became colder. Witness memories faded. Records aged. People moved away or died. But physical evidence from the investigation was preserved. That decision would become the reason the case could one day be solved. Among the stored items was Carla's clothing. Decades after the murder, new investigators returned to those materials with technology the original detectives could never have imagined. The case was reopened in 2019. Evidence was sent to the Serological Research Institute for new testing. From genetic material recovered from Carla's bra, the laboratory developed a single-source DNA profile belonging to an unknown male. Investigators searched the FBI's national DNA database. There was no match. The profile had survived for nearly half a century, but the man it belonged to was still unidentified. Detectives turned to Othram, a laboratory using forensic-grade genomic sequencing. The process wasn't a replacement for traditional police work. It was a way to generate a new lead from DNA that had failed to identify anyone through the usual database search. The analysis pointed investigators toward one surname: McCurley. Detectives returned to the original file. Glen McCurley was still alive. He still lived in Fort Worth, and he had already been questioned in 1974 because of the Ruger pistol. Police began watching his home. One night, officers collected 5 bags of garbage that had been placed at the curb. Inside the discarded material was a used drinking straw. The straw was sent for testing. The DNA profile recovered from it matched the unknown male profile found on Carla's clothing. Detectives then visited McCurley. He voluntarily provided another DNA sample. That sample matched as well. On September 21, 2020, police arrested Glen Samuel McCurley and charged him with capital murder. During an interview after his arrest, McCurley admitted that he had killed Carla. He also told detectives where they could find the Ruger pistol he had once claimed was stolen. Officers executing a search warrant found the gun hidden inside the ceiling of his home. The weapon had remained there while families grieved, detectives retired, and generations of forensic technology changed around it. The evidence from 1974 had finally returned to the man investigators had questioned at the beginning. McCurley initially pleaded not guilty. His attorneys challenged parts of the DNA evidence and his statement to detectives. The trial began in August 2021. For 2 days, jurors heard evidence about the preserved clothing, the DNA profile, the discarded straw, the Ruger pistol, and McCurley's recorded interview. Then, on the 3rd day, the trial stopped. McCurley waived his right to continue before the jury. In court, he changed his plea to guilty to capital murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison. After 46 years, the legal question of who killed Carla Walker had finally been answered. But other questions remained. Why did McCurley choose Carla and Rodney's car? Had he been watching them, or was the encounter random? What happened between the moment Carla was taken and the moment she was found? And why did McCurley keep the Ruger hidden in his own home for so many years? There is no verified public answer to those questions. There has also been speculation that McCurley may have committed other crimes. But he wasn't convicted of any other murder. That possibility must remain only a question, not a conclusion. The Carla Walker case was not solved because one dramatic new clue suddenly appeared. The most important evidence had been there all along. A gun magazine on the pavement, a name in an old file, a piece of clothing preserved in evidence storage. What changed was the ability to read what those objects had been holding for decades. For Carla's family, the guilty plea brought a form of justice, but it could not return the years taken from them. For Rodney McCoy, the conviction lifted a cloud of suspicion that had followed him since the night he was attacked and Carla was taken. And for the investigators who reopened the case, the result proved that cold does not always mean forgotten. Sometimes the truth is still present, inside a sealed evidence bag, inside an old report, inside the ceiling of an ordinary house, waiting for science, persistence, and time to finally bring it into the light. Carla Walker was 17 years old when her future was stolen. Her case remained unsolved for almost half a century, but the evidence survived, and in the end, it led investigators back to the man whose name had been there from the beginning.